We must grab a hold of our own energy, do the healing that we need to do, and then people around us will be affected. And this shift that is happening will come through us.
Hello and welcome to the Freedom Lovers Show. I'm your host, David Rodriguez, and we are building a voluntary world one relationship at a time. And I'm very excited to have a special guest, very powerful. We're about talking about sexual freedom today. I think this is one of the key things that a lot of people are missing, including myself, growing up knowing nothing about sex other than it was bad and evil. And I think that's completely opposite and wrong. And Becca's going to share a little bit about her wisdom and some of her stuff that she's doing. We're so grateful because it's really important work. She's author of Venus.
And her lover.
And her lover, right? And she's also a community activist and doing great work. So welcome to the show. And where would you like to start about this really important subject? Feel free to begin wherever you like. But maybe some of the viewers out there also, like myself, didn't have any sexual education, healthy sexual education. So where would you like to begin in terms of like re-educating the world about what is sex or why it's important and how it relates to freedom? I think we'll get there eventually, but feel free to start what's important to you.
I'd actually like to start right off the bat that sex, we have received a sex education. It's a negative sex education. And I would go so far as to call it programming.
Yep. We
have received programming that delivered a message to us that our bodies are dirty and sex is sinful. Now, those of you who are listening have probably done enough of the inner work or even the outer work about how the world is made. You know that when they tell you something is bad, it's a clue that probably you should investigate it, right. Unless you just go along with the trust test.
Right.
So what I contend after really decades of research and my own personal process, because I was raised like most people, in a sexually repressed society, basically I was raised with denial of our own sexuality. So what I have learned is that this programming that sex is bad, it's a sin, you don't have a right to your own pleasure. All of this is to keep us away from our root chakras. Now, anyone that's studied yogic science or done any breathing pranayama knows that you can circulate energy through your whole body, and you're usually starting at the root. Why? Because according to yogic science, the kundalini, life force energy, is curled at the base of the spine. Well, that's our sexual center. It's actually our root. The root chakra and the second chakra are where we generally experience sexuality. Now, a lot of what I teach in Tantra classes is that we can feel energy through our whole bodies. But to keep us out of where the real reservoir of our life force energy is means that we would be disempowered. Because if you can't move energy through your whole body, you're not going to have as much energy. So you're going to have to rely on things like coffee, and not to say that coffee's delicious. However,
instead of a natural energy,
yes.
Natural power.
Right.
Right. Because we all have natural power.
That's right.
Chi, would you call Kundalini, life force, Chi also?
Yes. Okay. Yes. Chi, prana, Kundalini is usually referred to as the sexual expression of that, but it's all life force energy.
Right.
And so by covering the root area off from us, by putting shame there and guilt there and fear there and trauma there, I might say, means that we won't be able to access our full power. Well, if you want to keep the slaves on the plantation, you actually don't want them to access their full power.
100%. Absolutely. So, I'm in full agreement. It's the strongest life force is the sexual energy. You were created in love, as we both were, which is amazing to dwell on that. So how can they learn to tap into that? I mean, I think there might be an unlearning process, but where would someone new begin? And we'll direct them to your work later because you have such great works and you can dive into it deeper. But how can they begin to learn maybe more about it, or to unlearn maybe some mantras, some affirmations, some exercises? Because freedom is really what we all desire as humans. And this organization called the state, which I got from the book Understanding Our Slavery, is intergenerational organized crime. And I said, wow, that is an amazing way to describe it, because you see it all around us with forced vaccines, property taxes, taxes in general. So imagine if you could tap into that power with your neighbors and just interact voluntarily. Okay, so that's a side note. So what can they do to unlearn that trauma, that shame, that guilt, when in reality it's probably like the superpower of humans?
Yes, it is. And Tantra, there are many schools of Tantra. I mean, there's a Hindu school, a Taoist school. And essentially what I've discovered in my research is that the esoteric parts of every religion, whether it was Buddhism or Judaism or even Sufism, which is part of Islam, has to do with sexual energy. But they kept it secret because, power corrupts. And when people in religions, we can say the priesthood, they learned all the sex magic and powerful secrets of the Kundalini because it increased their power, and they didn't want the peons that they discovered they could rule over to learn that. So the first thing I usually recommend is we have to work with self-love. Because part of why we think that a part of us, like our bodies, is shameful means that we don't value a part of ourselves. So it's a kind of split. It helps us go a little schizophrenic. So I recommend people start with mirror work. For example, you can just look at yourself in the mirror and say, I accept you. I see you. I know you have pure intentions. I love you. Because then you can then gain maybe enough self-confidence to begin to be able to touch yourself, your body, and the whole body is sensual. Orgasmic energy is in every part of the body. So then I would recommend setting a time aside where you just explore your body, like, wow, I love the feel of my skin, or this is how my hair is. We all have our own body shapes, our own body types, and we're being programmed with this idea of models and, for example, like sucking in the gut, which makes it impossible to breathe. You need to be able to breathe to be able to circulate chi. It's amazing how thorough the negative sexual programming is. So start with self-love and get in the body. Maybe you want to go to a ballet class, or maybe you like to swim, or maybe you like to do Pilates, or maybe you like to play tennis or run or whatever. Get into the body so you can look at yourself in the mirror, and even if you don't like your body shape, just say, wow, this is the container for this divine being that I am, and begin to appreciate yourself, to get over the shame. Because we have been told in 1,000 ways to be ashamed of yourself. And it's not, yes, be ashamed of your body and even your full self. So
conform.
Yes.
Be like other people, not yourself.
Yeah. So those are the very beginning things of self-love. Now, what can happen when a person begins to explore the genitalia? Because remember, the genitals, the root chakra, which is right here in the perineum, is where we have been told under no circumstances go there. It needs to be a dark room, and and it's a sin when you go there. So learning just how to touch oneself and breathing through that, because it might be uncomfortable. Not actually, it might actually be painful, but in general we'll just feel kind of squeamish because of that programming that this part of our body is the dark zone. I mean, the word pudenda means parts of shame. No, they're parts of celebration. They're parts of creation.
And joy and pleasure and co-creation and reproduction of human life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So see, the thing is, what happens in these lower chakras, it's our point of creation,
Yes.
right? So if you want to write a book or compose music or write a play or do a business or invent a new thing, you are working with the energy out of this part of the body. And the root connects to the earth, so that will help you manifest it. And each chakra has different associations. Anyway, back to these exercises of learning how to touch oneself. And if you're uncomfortable, or even if you're not, breathe. Just breathe it in and breathe it out. Because when we have lovers, we generally expect them to be mind readers. So our sex is, because no one really taught us, we expect them to read our minds. But the funny thing is, we may not even know in our own minds.
Because it's such a foreign territory. It's a foreign area.
That's right. Yeah. So what I'm suggesting is, if you are afraid to ask for what you'd like in sex, you may be afraid because you don't even know. So as you touch yourself, you can go, wow, I like it actually like this, right? Or I like a feather touch. Or I like it slower, I like it faster. And as we get to know ourselves, then we are able to communicate with our lovers and say, okay, I need you to slow down now. And okay, I'll let you know, right? So we learn how to not be ashamed to ask for what we want.
Beautiful. No, that's awesome. Really valuable there. The extra look in the mirror and affirming and just feeling comfortable just with touching ourselves, even not in a sexual way, just touch, yes. I think is very pleasurable, a lot of the time. Okay, so now they've done this over maybe weeks and months, and they've begun to reprogram their minds and become comfortable with it. What type of benefits do they have once they're tapped into that? You mentioned manifestation, which is huge, but it seems like there might be some other energy released.
Yes. So what I have to mention here is why we're afraid to go there. We live, according to what I can see, a trauma-based mind control system. And what I describe in my book, Venus and Her Lover, Transforming Myth, Sexuality, and Ourselves. I mean, my partner and I were doing this tantric art project just to express our love, really, for one another and the glories of loving one another.
Beautiful.
In the bodies.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so our project, Venus and Her Lover, is the story. It's he painted the erotic art and I wrote poetry, and then I wrote a book describing our whole process, which of course would end up being a process of my own sexual liberation, because I recognized that I had shame, even though I had all these beliefs about, well, no, the body is beautiful and it's wonderful to share it. When it came right down to certain points, like, because the erotic art was based on photography, and I felt like, well, you're not going to show us in that. And he's like, what are you saying? You talk all the time about how glorious it is. Yeah, so I'm feeling my own shame. Anyway, I describe all these things. I can't believe I'm revealing all these things in a book, but
and probably helping so many other women out there for years and years to come.
Yes, that's right. So I describe my own process of overcoming my sexual guilt and shame. So what I discovered, and what most people will discover, I'm sorry to say, is trauma. And I work as a therapist, I work as a couples counselor, and so sometimes I'm doing hypnotherapy, and I have been shocked to discover, and I'm not leading my client, I'm just like in hypnotherapy, like you're discovering what's there. And what I so often discover is sexual trauma by the uncle, the father, the grandfather, the brother, the neighbor. I mean, it's truly shocked me that it was this prevalent. So there's that. And then there is pedophilia. which
Very hot topic right now. Yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. And that's probably the almost the second generation or third generation of suppressed sexual knowledge and wisdom and truth, because your parents don't know, your grandparents don't know, and it's a strong desire. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on pedophilia and why it exists, and maybe how people should respond or think about it.
Yes. Okay, so if when you do these touching exercises, you feel squeamish or scared or panic, this would be an excellent. If you feel panic, there's a reason. That's not natural. That could mean that somebody has violated your boundaries there. It could just be somebody molested you, somebody felt you up. It could be rape. And when this happens to us when we're young, or really any age, a survival mechanism is to bury that memory. So then I recommend you see a therapist. I recommend you go to a therapist who can help you uncover your memories so that you can own them. And it's not your fault if somebody violated you, but it is your responsibility to heal. Because as long as we're a sexually scared society, we're just going to keep perpetuating and it's been going for millennia, this inability to access our true power. Right. And now rape is actually a strategy in all war. And I was shocked in my practice with clients under hypnotherapy that they were accessing the memories of their grandparents in war where rape happened. So it's passed down the genetic line. So if you feel uncomfortable, again, there's no shame in that. However, my campaign, one of them, but it is our responsibility to stop that, to break that for our whole lineage so we don't pass this on to our kids. Right. So that our children will be able to enjoy freer sexual lives. So, okay, the trauma.
Can I take that somewhere?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's not your fault. Whatever trauma happens, not your fault, but it is our responsibility to own it and heal as much as we can. Right? There's a lot of things not in our control, including breathing and living and dying. Right? There's some things we just can't control, and being abused or whatever happened, verbally or physically, just happens sometimes. So, pausing there and say, okay, now they've been able to heal and become, connected to that. Now they have a partner.
Yeah.
So now you bring two really powerful beings, and it seems maybe one person is high sex nature or in touch, and the other one isn't. Maybe couples out there now. How important is it to have harmonious or trusting sexual relations in a partnership or in a spousal marriage situation? Because I think many couples might be suffering, and this might be an opportunity to open up some doors of how important it is, and maybe how they can begin learning about it and helping each other feel expressed in sexual pleasure.
Excellent question. Many couples are suffering out there, and when we aren't having enjoyable sex, or not having what we frequent, defined by us, however often we would like to have sex, that is a symptom of the need for intimacy. Because what people really want, sure, people would like to have great sex, and it's wonderful, but the main thing people want is intimacy. So when I'm working with my clients, I am giving them intimacy exercises, which, what am I teaching? It's funny, like people come to a Tantra workshop, I'm like, okay, now we're going to learn how to listen. It's like, what? Now we're going to learn how to express our feelings. Now we're going to learn how to identify our feelings. These are all foundational for intimacy. So the best thing to do, like if you're in a relationship right now where there's no spark, there's no sexual heat, then I would recommend that you start with, one of the exercises I give is just eye gazing. Absolutely. Sit with your partner for 5 minutes, no words, and just look into one another's eyes. Now, 5 minutes can seem like a long time when you start, but the idea is you could even extend it. And then I'll often recommend that couples like sit facing one another, and you can even like wrap your legs around one another. That's called a yab yum, and breathe together. Just breathing together, right? Inhaling and exhaling together. And you can do it with eye gazing, or you can embrace one another so each one's looking the opposite direction, or close your eyes, because then you're going to have to rely on your body sensations. And so by closing down the visual, then you just breathe together and feel how do our bodies feel touching? How are we breathing together? These are so simple. Anyone can do them. But usually if there's been a fight or a long period of coldness in a relationship, you don't want to look into their eyes.
There's the emotional block. I think because genital exchange or intercourse is so personal, if you have an emotional block with somebody, you don't want to get closer. You have this barrier, and who knows how many layers there are, in regular relationships. So it's hard to get through because it is kind of a dangerous thing to bring someone in who's emotionally unsafe or, not respectful, to have that intimacy.
I want to make one.
Yeah.
I have a friend, Piazza, who wrote a book called The Intimacy Adventure Playbook. And they are exercises. I forget, there's 20 or whatever. And they are safe. There's different levels of investment of your personal vulnerability. But if you don't know where to start, that Intimacy Adventure Playbook gives you here's an exercise we can do, and it's just a talking exercise, so that feels pretty safe, so we can start there, and then you can move on to more touching exercises. But I see so many couples that are suffering, and so it is my plea to anyone that this resonates with: if you're shivering out in the cold in your relationship, please make a move, because life is too short. We don't know how long we're here for. You don't have to suffer. And if you have children, you are modeling for them dysfunctional behavior. And if we're going to ever break this chain of the dominator system, that's what I call it, the dominator system, and get people to be self-responsible, we need to be able to own our own energy and say, wow, I'm scared and I'm uncomfortable in my body, and so I'm going to get help. And there's so many resources out there. So what I'm saying is, make a move. Start today to improve your relationship with yourself and your partner.
Beautiful. Yeah, the dominator system that you call it, or the state system, as other people would call a third party that just asserts jurisdiction over you and tells you to do things and force you to do things without your permission, is super disrespectful and trauma creating. And so as you tap into your sexual power, you can become empowered into that, and then even stronger, even more capable to deal with the things in life. And then you kind of tapped on a question that I think is really important also, is the children, so parents out there who have gone through the state school system or the dominator system and all this corporate sexual propaganda, using the strong power to help you buy their Coca-Cola or their Budweiser or whatever the product is, they tie that in there. So it's consumer based rather than intimate and mutually beneficial and loving and wonderful. How do you have the conversation with children? Do you have a preferred age, or is it kind of, child by child? What do they say? I'm sure a lot of parents out there would love to hear someone who has a great understanding of a healthy sexual relationship and how it's so important, and how to explain that to their child, what age, and anything else that might be involved with explaining that power.
Okay, so of course, we as parents are just learning as we go, right? And I had the rather unique situation in that when my son was a tween, maybe he started 9, 10, I'm thinking when Venus and Her Lover as a project started, I wasn't letting him see the art because it's erotic art. And I looked at that, am I ashamed of this? Am I communicating shame? And then actually James, my partner, challenged me on that, and I'm like, okay, we'll just keep it in the bedroom. And he comes in the bedroom and he can see the art there. And so what I used as my guideline was his questions. When he began to ask, that's when I never, plus I walk around naked in the house, and so he was raised in a pretty free environment, so he never got the message that bodies are dirty. And then he's seeing this art on the walls, and I just thought this will be within his parameters of what's natural, but what we're doing in the art I waited till he asked the questions. And so I would say the answer is it must be age appropriate. And I rarely actually had to ask, because my son was curious enough that he asked the questions.
At what age?
He started asking around 10 or 11.
Where babies come from, what are these organs, what kind of questions was he asking?
Actually, like where do babies come from came much earlier,
Right.
much
5 or
earlier.
6.
Yeah, or even younger. And I would just say there's a mix of polarities. There's like when a man and woman love each other, they can create a baby because that's the power of creation. Well, how did they do it? And so I would explain, okay, the masculine principle is like up and out, so he has a penis, and the feminine principle is down and in, so she has a vagina or a yoni, and that's where they get together. According to his questions. I didn't put it on him. And I tell a funny story in my book. One time I was, we would carpool to get the kids to school, and so I had a group of like 12-year-olds, 12-year-old boys in the back of the van, and I'm driving and I'm hearing them talking about girls. It was like a ridiculous conversation, and I'm just like, I'm just driving, I'm not saying anything. And so my son pipes up and he says, "Hey, why don't we ask my mom?" And they're like, "What? Are you crazy? Ask your mom?" And he's like, "Well, she's a girl, like she would know." And they're like, No. And he said to them, "Well, I'd rather ask her than talk to you guys who don't know anything."
Nice. That's beautiful.
Which is the truth.
That's
because
amazing.
if I think about my sex education, which in school was, they wouldn't even say the words. Right. And I got it from my peers, and we didn't know anything. Mm-hmm. So I always made myself available. That was the thing. My son was raised with the knowledge that we were available. That sure, he could ask his peers, but he already got that they didn't know anything. So he came to us, and so like the conversation really got more meaty, more content, like around age 11, 12, 13. He was really curious because that's when, the hormones are beginning, and he's beginning to look at girls, and he's curious. And yet he was I didn't ever see him like go wild or irresponsible, because always with the conversation was, there's a lot of enjoyment and pleasure in this exploration, and there's a lot of responsibility. Yeah. So we gave it to him, and as he asked, in a balanced way. And it's an unusual scenario because we had erotic art available. Right. So it wasn't like photography, it was paintings. And by the way, you can see a lot of this art on the website venusandherlover.com. So we were, and I already was referencing Hindu art and tantric art, like Tibetan Buddhist art, that shows the man and woman in union, the Buddha and the Dakini. So I could point to art, and it's not as much like photography in your face. So he was getting about, when I was talking about circulating energy within the couple, this was all making sense to him because I could illustrate it.
Yeah, so as parents out there, one of the challenges you're going to have is if you haven't begun the work to heal your trauma, sexual trauma, or just learn more about it, then you do feel shame when your child asks you, whether they're 6 or 10, and they're like, "Hey, what's this thing down here? Or how does that work?" And you're like, "What do I say?" And, in my homeschool consulting stuff, I tell parents, just keep it simple. Like you said, use their questions. You don't got to show them everything. You got to give them the, encyclopedia version, but they just have a question. And a one-word answer might work. maybe 5 words, something short, and as they get older, you can start to get into it. And then my recommendation is be as truthful as you can with children about these things, because it's such an important thing. And I've seen, family members who have, let's say, a young child who's like 5 years old, and they start playing with themselves, and they would scold him for playing with his own body or exploring.
Yes.
So, of course, it's not my child, so I have nothing to say other than nothing to say, right? So it's a very personal thing, child rearing. But to be as truthful and even give them the correct words of the body part, and I've just done a little bit of tantra work, and so learning the yoni and the lingam has been very helpful.
Right. Those were the words we used with my son.
Yeah. So it's different when you have those words that are like sacred, and it's like, this is a really important part of your body, and whatever your beliefs are, you can share or not share, but it's beautiful and it has a huge responsibility, as you said. So I think kind of just touching maybe one of the other controversial topics is pedophilia. There's a rise of, I don't know if it's prevalence or just exposure. These psychopaths who run these organizations seem to prey on children.
Yes.
And you can look up some of the research behind that. So what is the reason behind it? Or maybe you want to go a different direction in how this is an effective society, or what the viewers might want to know about pedophilia, knowing that you have all this information.
Yeah, that's a deep rabbit hole. So it depends on how far down you want to go. I've gone pretty far, and it's really horrific.
Yeah.
So I'll say what I've found so far.
Right. Horrific mean like kidnapping of children and worse things.
Yeah,
yes.
Kidnapping and what they do to children.
Yeah.
So if you accept my thesis that we're in a trauma-based mind control system, then traumatizing children is top of the list. So a traumatic birth, a medically managed birth, separate the child from the mother, circumcision, wounding a baby boy in what will become the seat of his power as a man is criminal.
Yep.
And we all flip out about female circumcision. Well, it's standard practice to do that to boys in the United States. And then you've got the creepy uncles and all the other ways. Okay, so that is programming in the dominator system that says that it's subconscious that children are prey. And so people who are sexually repressed because of pornography and films and all this programming
and unmet needs, I would say.
Yeah.
Unmet questions.
Yeah, so they are actually channeled into becoming predators.
Yeah.
And then there's the whole satanic ritual abuse picture, which is, I have studied this, and I can only take it in small doses because it's so hard to imagine that there are people that prey on children sexually and then rape and murder them. But it is so. It happens. And so now, again, this is going down the rabbit hole. When you look at who's at the top hidden layers of the pyramid, the psychopathic rulers, and who's above them, they're mostly Satanists. And who cloak what they're doing as Christianity usually, or Judaism, or whatever the religion of the region is. But they're channeling children into the satanic ritual abuse because they're actually stealing the energy of this innocent energy of children. It's really sick. But they're psychopaths. So, and I never thought, like when I was growing up in the United States, that some kid's picture would show up on a milk carton. And I remember way back when there were like 40,000 children abducted a year. And that was just, something that happened. But when you think about it, like, how many child stealers are there? 40,000, 50,000, 60,000, 80,000 children a year? Really? You got to wonder where these kids are going. And now these children are traumatized. The ones that survive, they're usually they go into survival mode, and they're programmed to forget. But now, thank you internet, thank you free internet, more and more of these people are regaining their memories and blowing the whistle. And these interviews are hard to listen to. I've listened to quite a few of people remembering, boys and girls, how they were abducted, how their parents, if they were part of some Masonic lodge or some, some that would actually secret societies, if they were politicians, they would hand their kids over. It's abhorrent to me. I can hardly imagine it, but this goes on. And so this is the sea in which we're swimming. The people who are enforcing the laws, this is what they do on the weekends. Yeah. So it filters down into our society with this idea that children are prey and they're fair game. But what's behind it is traumatize as much people as possible. That's why our own healing, because we were all traumatized to one degree or another, hopefully, not physically, but, emotional abuse and physical abuse. The more we can heal, this is the job we have, especially if we have kids, is to heal so we can become whole people, access our own energy, and then we can create an environment of safety for our children that comes from really knowing safety comes from my own power.
Beautiful. Yeah, I think stepping into our own power is about self-reliance, and then with other peaceful humans you can create positive relationships and maybe some kind of partnership or win-win outcome type situation. So the great news, as you mentioned, the free internet, information is increasing, people are realizing these things, this is getting out, and people are taking their power back. We're at a great freedom event here in Acapulco, Mexico, and there's almost 2,000 people here, and it's been going on for 5 years. So whether it's this event or other events, the information age is under us, and now I think it's almost like the transformation age. It feels like a huge increase of human consciousness in many things, sexual things, financial things, educational, a lot health. The health system, that's another conversation. So is there any final words? I want to just kind of wrap up here. Thank you for your time. This has really been helpful. Hopefully you guys have found some value from it, because we want to wrap up with using the freedom and the power inside as it relates to sex so that other people can find their power. And you gave us some exercises. Any closing thoughts or things you want to share with them as they've processed this information? And like you said, I know I've had trauma or wounding, whether it's just through knowledge or emotion and curiosity. It's like your body changes and you're like, what's going on here? And we didn't feel safe to talk to anybody because that was a bad thing. And now we're beginning to realize it's a great thing. It's healthy. We have a great life, and we pass away, and whatever happens after that, we don't know, but hopefully it's wonderful. But we're here now, and that's a great power. So any closing thoughts for the viewers?
The time is now. We're at a shift of an age, I do believe. This old system is falling away, and we know that people are really waking up because of how hard the system is working on repression right now.
Or censorship.
Yeah, and censorship. While we have a free internet and are able to talk about this stuff, the time is now, and the responsibility is yours. Do the work, because we huddle in our fear and anguish and sadness and disempowerment. That's not going to build a better world. We must, according to me, we must grab a hold of our own energy, do the healing that we need to do, and then people around us will be affected. And this shift that is happening will come through us.
Yeah. Absolutely. The time is now. There is no past, there is no future. We just have this moment. Thank you for sharing this moment with me today. And remember, we are building a voluntary world, one relationship at a time. Thanks for joining the Freedom Lovers Show. Freedom worldwide. We'll see you next time. Bye for now.